like we'll just introduce ourselves like again just for the video. So I'm Kritarth, and I know Abhishek. He was my junior in college, and so we're doing these calls like in the community. Like the basic idea is to get more and more people trying to do different things and have a platform where people can share knowledge about certain things that they are expert in. So basically just have a community of like-minded kind of people. Or so I know the work that you guys are doing, and I thought that I'd like to share what you guys are doing with the community. That is why I invited you. Oh, also, like, I'd like you guys to join. So Saket, would you like to introduce yourself? Then we'll have our guests introduce.
Yeah, that's a good intro. Hi, my name is Saket. I'm based out of Menlo Park, California, and I used to be the colleague of Mr. Kitar when he was here at Facebook. But I work in the headquarters of Facebook as partnerships manager, basically looking into some of the stuff around product development. And as Kitar said, like one of the fundamental ideas behind doing this is basically, in general, we like talking to each other, like this group, right? It's a good avenue for us to catch up on what each of us are doing, and also try to learn something if we can. But that's not the primary objective. The primary objective has always been, and again, like the derivative of catching up actually results into some sort of learning every time we actually talk. So I'm actually pretty excited to hear what you guys are doing there. When it was a research media, I saw YouTube videos that you guys put out pretty awesome actually. I really love the work that you guys are doing, and really looking forward to hearing more from you.
Just like ending our introduction. So like he said, like the major objective is just to talk to each other. हमारा नाम is AurBatao. It's basically like we started having these conversations and we hit at AurBatao. उसके बाद हमें समझ नहीं आता था what to talk about. So we find like really interesting things to talk about, and that is why this entire setup. So yeah, would you guys like to introduce yourself? And like Abhishek, मतलब आत्मा types दिख रहा है मुझे थोड़ा थोड़ा, I guess.
You need to come in front.
You come or you go, man.
Yeah, let's keep him. Let's keep him for some time.
Sure. Please introduce you guys.
Well, hi, I'm Surabhi. I am a co-team member of NavGurukul. And before this, I was at Berkeley. I was actually in the Bay Area. I was finishing my master's in international development. And I've known Abhishek for almost a decade now. So now we are figuring out how to make sure that the jobs that we aspire also reach to wider net set of people. How to bridge this gap between needs and aspiration for a whole set of communities. So that's what we're doing right now. Abhishek, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So as Kritarth mentioned, I'm junior of Kritarth. Did startups after that, then worked with the government. And over there, identified that a lot of students who are doing well in academically, basically in schools, they do not end up getting good jobs. So we started with this very simple question of, can we give them some kind of environment and infrastructure such that they are able to have access to jobs that they aspire to, and also that they can essentially easily pull off, just that they need support doing that. Started that question in many ways, and NavGurukul is sort of trying to come up to an answer to that question basically, and we're still trying to see how it emerges in a way such that we cater to more and more aspirations, not just software engineering. As we mentioned, reach out to a wider group of people. But the basic idea is to challenge the higher education that exists today, which has many problems.
Yes. So we'll definitely venture into that. We'll just have Malla sir introduce himself, and then we'll begin this thing.
Oh, hello. Sorry I'm late. I'm Ravi. I'm Kritarth's batchmate. And though I have never interacted with Abhishek directly, I know he has a hero image. Like, I think in all the 4 years around him, because he has like a Mark Zuckerberg kind of he had gap year for months. So he definitely like has sort of a aura around him. So happy to finally get to learn more about what he's doing. I live in the Bay Area. I'm working for Google. That's probably like it.
All right. So like Abhishek, we'll start with like why I found a old call when I met you like few years ago. I had a recorder. Like this whole thing came from that. So you were talking about like the problems with education system ki actually hota kya hai, and you had some experience working with the Delhi government school initiative. So let's start there. Like what did you observe, and why do you, like, of all the things that you could do, why did you pick up this particular thing?
I think largely social factor तो anyhow करना ही था. The question was to do really what. And education is the most cliched, obvious middle class answer because when you grow up in an urban setting without going to government school, government hospitals, not knowing farming, etc. So you think the only solution to the problem is education. If I get educated, I'll take care of myself and my family. So I think with that understanding, education was very natural. Did that in college, and after that also started working with Delhi government. I mean, after my startup basically. So I was working with Delhi government, which was an extension of Aam Aadmi Party, and I knew a lot of people there. So that led me to work with some of the important people over there directly. So I could implement some technological initiatives, and while implementing them, as I mentioned, I could come across to a lot of students who were doing academically well. Like there was this student who scored around 72% or something in commerce. And despite having a very broken family, his dad was into drugs, they would still the thing. But essentially, peddling drugs, has been to jail many times. He really have very non-working relationships. Stayed in an RSS Shakha because his grandmother realized that he should not live in home. Very, very funny circumstances. And yet he tried to keep doing a lot. He was working at a bakery at rupees.
I'm
Then
sorry, Abhishek.
yeah.
Is the network bad? Also,
Charging is not a problem.
charging is.
What are you sorry about, Kritat? Go ahead, dude.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah,
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Start froze.
Without,
I think the part has an issue from his end.
Yeah. I think he was probably alluding to the fact that I think the whatever you were saying from that side was actually coming out broken a little bit. I think he was alluding to that, like if you can, I don't know, like how to fix it, but probably like get closer to the mic. I don't know if that he.
The only, I think both of us can't be in the frame. So when you're speaking, you can be in the frame. Go ahead. So at least you're closer to it. Okay. Here you go.
I have a mic if you want.
No, it's okay.
Within community. And it is not to say what we are doing is to be discredited, but just to say that people who really are going through the problems, they need to be equipped to solve their own problems, rather than someone else going to their community and say, "Oh, I'm going to be a savior and will solve it." So, I mean, a couple of like mixing a couple of these ideas, I think NavGurkul became a very obvious thing to happen. The only question was again, what do we do? Like, what kind of aspirations can we cater to, and what kind of people do we reach out to? And there's this inherent conflict in that because when you're trying to expand it, so if you look at higher education, mostly it's very exclusive. You try to choose all the time. I mean, we want to have best of the people in our campus, best of the teachers, best of the students. What it does is it makes everything competitive and tries to, right? I mean, the J itself, for example, is the most exclusive things possible. So if you are struggling, let's say if you are from a tribal area, if you're a girl, it's impossible to get into basically IIT or any other college like that. So if you want to reach out to that, essentially you're saying that I do not care what the society's notion of best or whatever is. We are going to focus a lot more on decreasing our own baselines. Be able to work with the students who need us most and adapt our curriculum accordingly. That's where our curriculum challenges or teaching challenges lie. They're not really to make someone a software engineer. They're really to reach out to the most vulnerable we can reach out to and help them become whatever is higher education they need.
I mean, there's so many questions that I have for you on this, but like, I think even before going into what you're doing right now, I probably want to understand like I don't know, the mindset that it requires to basically venture into something like this, right? Like if you go to elite college like IIT or whatever, like where just the badge of being there will probably set you up for life, if not up for life, or at least for your first job, right? What exactly was the mindset actually doing this? I heard you talked about that like social entrepreneurship was something that obviously.
Yeah, I'll add to that question.
Yeah.
I'll add to that question. Like, what were you doing just before this? So, like, you were probably on a path. I remember you were into entrepreneurship while you were in college. You created a startup when you were in college. So, yeah, like, uh, just adding that to Saket's question.
Yeah. So I think so for me, so when I started, I mean, NavGurukul, I don't think social entrepreneurship was very hip was at least in my circle. I'd never heard about it. So when I started NavGurukul, I did not know social entrepreneurship. I did not know anyone who started an NGO. So for me, it was completely new. It was just something I knew had to be done. Whether it goes to a non-profit, for-profit, social enterprise, those were all tech tech words for it. But I think my mindset particularly was sort of reckless in one way. I mean, in my college, in the college time, I wanted to pursue PhD because my mentors were doing PhD. So my mentors were Saurabh and Nitesh, who are in Berkeley now.
Yeah.
So they're in Berkeley. So I was like, no, I'm going to do PhD. So I was applied for an internship during winters. So I just thought, yeah, I'll go to US and check it out. And then my visa got rejected. So that makes me really furious. What the fuck? I mean, I worked so hard towards this internship. For 1 month, they're going to pay me everything, and this visa officer rejected me. They don't understand shit. So I came out of my visa office. I had my laptop, so I opened my laptop and opened the ideas folder, and I thought, whatever idea I'll decide right now, I'll do a startup about it. So in the next 5 minutes, I decided the startup. So my dad called me and he's like, "How's it going? Your visa thing and everything?" I said, "It's going. I mean, they rejected me, but I found a new idea. I'm going to work on it." So they thought the guy has got crazy because I actually spent a lot of months. I didn't have a passport. I had to do so much to it. That internship and passport and finally it got dropped. So I mean, this is very reckless. Just that moment deciding that I would do a startup, and only deciding from barely 5 or 6 ideas. So while people suffer from a problem of optimizing what they have to do, I think I was very reckless enough to not think about much. So and I think things started flowing. I started my first startup, Zumble, which where we made a lot of mistakes, fortunately. And then we got it semi-quiet sort of thing. So that gave me some cash liquidity in my life. That also helped me to ask some important questions about money, at least for what does it mean to me? What do I really want to do with it? And a lot of questions I would start asking to people, like, what would you do if you had a lot of money? And most of the times answers were very cliched and very like there were just answers like, I'll buy a house near a beach and just lie down there and fish and whatnot. So interestingly, most of the answers did not require money. They didn't require they didn't require what they were basically doing. But we were just living in a romantic world where we wanted to do something that we could do right away itself. So coupled with those ideas, I think I just like this. It's just going to be a loop here. I'm going to stuck if I keep doing it. Another question that really helped me was how much money do I need to make before I retire? So I and my co-founder came to a number of 5 crores. That if we have 5 crores in a bank account, we should retire. We don't need to think about money after that. Whether on retiring we work for companies or we work for any, it's a different question altogether. But then my co-founder already had 10 crores in his bank account. Fortunately, so I said, Nikus, you already have 10 crores. He said, yeah, but then why are you not retiring? He said, no, I don't know. So that again was a reminder that it's a loop. You don't sort of get out of it unless you want to get out of it. Another thing that helped me to sort of take this plunge was to understand that I can make money when I want to. So I did not tell myself that I'm not going to make money. I just told myself that this is not the time I want to make. So if I want to make money at 35, I'll make money at 35. What I'm doing right now does not make me any less valuable than or less commodity driven than I mean than earlier. So I just delayed the question of having money, and I said, okay, I'll do it whenever I want. And right now, my focus is to meet my aspirations, and my degree is or my background has to be an asset to it and not a liability. So if someone says, but you are an IITian, so I says, okay, fine. Is that degree supposed to be a liability or an asset? If it is liability, then it's fine. I mean, your question is very right. But how are you going to sort of do it with IIT? But I've considered it as an asset. So whatever I'm going to do is going to help me out. So I just need to identify what I want to do and understand that degree is supposed to be my asset. So yeah, I think these kind of conversations and changes really help me.
Great answer. And I think the amount of clarity that you have in your head is like insane. I would say. I think one small question. Obviously, I don't want to take all the time just for myself, but I can ask you questions all day long. It's basically from something that you talk, which is the idea folder, right? Like, what is the idea folder? How did it came about? Like, can you talk a little bit about it?
Idea
folder.
Idea folder. Yeah, nothing. I mean, I just had a Google Drive folder, and so basically in the first semester, now I went to install Ubuntu on my laptop. So everything got formatted. So that was a lesson that everything has to be on cloud or it is not on my laptop. So everything was in Google Drive, basically nothing like that. I mean, then ideas folder was a very small folder where anything that will come across my mind, I'll just put it on Google Drive. But yeah, nothing fancy about it. I don't maintain it any further. Surbi has a list of everything. She has a list of ideas, list of things that she has to do. So we started making a list of things that we have to do professionally and we have to do personally. It's a list of about 50, 60 things already. We like add 10 things a day and we remove probably one thing only. So I mean, Surbi can sort of
Yeah,
That's right.
if so we can talk a little bit about it, I think that'd be great. I think like a lot, and the reason I'm asking this question is like a lot of us we think about all this energy and all the like the assets that we have, like how do we utilize it, and at you would not believe at most of the time ideas are the ones which basically hold us back in terms of that I don't really think this is a good idea. So how do you validate that something goes in that box of like, okay, these are the things that I actually want to do later?
I mean, again, I think as I mentioned, for me the idea is not important. Even at NavGurukul, I don't feel that there's just so much attachment or longing for this idea. I think it could have been anything different. So we and I have been brainstorming on many ideas actually. Even today we brainstorm like what else can we do. For example, we have been discussing child trafficking and I personally do not feel that ideas are really important. What is really important is can you stay there for a long, long time to make it work. And that's something I've seen with a lot of people who were there, whose ideas people found absolutely stupid, like, these are never going to work. But they stayed and it worked. The case in point in News in Shorts, for example. I mean, when News in Shorts came up, people just ostracized them that you're being crazy. You want to write articles, write news summaries all by yourself, and then publish them to people. What kind of IP are you going to have? Why people are going to consume this? They already have so many news applications. Nobody's interested in news. What not? What not? What. And today they're a huge company, and it just changed like that. When they got Tiger Global funding, everybody's like, oh wow. I mean, we always knew it, but I know because they were friends and I've seen their journey. They actually came to Nikonj, who was my co-founder for investment. I have seen that reaction and I've seen them knowing that this reactions are so usual that people just discard them.
I think I'll still push back. I think taking an example of a mainstream innovation. Oh, okay. I think taking an example of mainstream innovation still doesn't help in terms of ideas in social sector because um, if Abhishek and I are solving someone's problem and if we don't belong to the community, idea is anyway not important. You have to be there and experiment constantly that what's working, what's not working. And it's essentially, if I may use the buzzword co-creation, it cannot not happen without it. So we can sit and write a lot of ideas in that folder. At the end of the day, it's going to be tested massively when you go out there because there is half of the time there is no market. You have to create a market for an idea, right? So idea is nothing but it's just something to hold on to before you jump into the sea, and you hopefully take feedback and work on.
So like we discussed about the idea. Like now I want to go forward. Like when you guys actually started, like what happened? Like what were the hardships you faced? How did you convince people to send their kids to live with you? How did you decide on how will you guys impart this knowledge? What all did you experiment with? Like if you can talk about those.
I had a tiny interruption. So do you think people who might be listening this know what NavGurukul is?
Why don't we start with the introduction?
Yeah.
Well, I'll write something up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, NavGurukul is challenging the notions of higher education and the access to higher education and quality aspirational jobs.
Camera a little bit. Like I can see.
We're still trying to share the camera screen. Anyway, okay. No, NavGurukul is challenging the question of equal access to higher education, quality education, and more than that, high career growth job opportunities. And how are we doing that right now? It's a fully funded year-long residential learning program where we train young adults from socially and economically marginalized communities into software engineering. So within 1 year, the focus is on training them with programming languages, English training, and a lot of leadership development, quality development, personality development. And the culture of NavGurukul is what I love the most. It's focused on trust-based self-learning. So the students decide what they want to do, how they want to do it. So we want to protect the notion of choice, right? You're not going to get into a job because it's your circumstances. We want our students to be able to come to a point where they choose jobs that no, the company culture is not good. I don't want to be here. I want to be here. And thankfully, in last 2 years, around 60 students have been placed in really good companies. Some companies are as big as Mindtree or ThoughtWorks or DirectEye. And student salaries have ranged from 20,000 to 40,000 per month. These are starting salaries, and we hope that they're going to grow, and the students are going to grow it in their professional journey. And the plus thing is that these students are now become at young age, at 18 and 19, they're becoming the biggest breadwinners in the family. And there's a lot that comes to your life and to your family when you are so financially independent, especially for girls in our campus. I think it's the impact on their personal lives is massive, and not just on their own personal life, in their personal lives of their community. Forget just the family. So yeah, NavGurukul is a fully funded year-long residential learning program for training software engineers. That's what we are. Now Abhishek can talk about the initial hurdles.
Yeah. So I think when we started, I mean, obvious challenges were there: money, trust, not even having any peace. Like we didn't have curriculum, we didn't have jobs. We just had a very random idea, and
Yeah, it's recording.
Yes, started recording.
Great.
Thank you so much. So yeah, it only breaks now if you disconnect. So yeah, please go on. Trust is hard earned.
So we were talking about the admission process of NavGurukul. So we do a three-step process. First is the written test, which is based on basic algebra, class 10th math, and class 5 English. So we start from there, and the reason we have to do that is because you do need certain level of logic and math if you're learning programming, and we're trying to lower that bar, working on that. And then once the student clears it, I think once the student clears it, we move on to a small English test, like it's a 30 minutes English test. And then there is a telephonic interview. On the phone interview, we ask, again, the algebra questions, just to ensure that the person has not cheated when they were giving the exam, because the exam is remote. They can give it on their smartphone, the first exam. So the phone interview is around just checking their thinking abilities, their ability to translate English into mathematical equations, and also talking about culture fit, because the culture of NavGurukul drives everything. So whether they would be able to, contribute to the culture, contribute to the community, whether they'll be okay with the lifestyle that we have here, because it has to be very self-driven learning, and also doing a lot of giving forward kind of attitude that we need in our community. So we do a culture fit interview, and that's that. Once the student clears all of it, they get selected. And the students, this is something recently that we began. If a student clears the test but hasn't cleared the interview, we offer them tuition support that they can give the test again with some preparation. So they get in touch with our students and prepare for a few weeks or a month, and then they give the test again. So we want to make sure that more and more people can avail the opportunity and not be constrained by, it becomes a loop. If you didn't have a good school, you won't get into places like NavGurukul or in other colleges as well. So we want to break that if someone didn't have quality education in school, they should still be able to come here, and we should change our pedagogy according to them. So that's working.
So one thing I want to know is like one thing I want to know is like probably you guys have some bar or some standard that you want to like definitely hit, because not everybody can be a programmer. So what do you do about that? And the second question I have is it so say like Super 30 is another example. They pick 30 students from underprivileged backgrounds and give them training, right? So I'm not saying you are like that. I just want to ask you, like, you probably also have like a number of seats that you have to select X number of people, and amongst the background you'll select the brightest. Is it like incorrect or unfair to say that?
I mean, for boys, it's the answer would be different for boys and girls. So for boys, for example, we get more applicants than the seats that we have at the moment. And I think for them, and the reasons are obvious, right? Like it's easier for boys to get out of the home. It's easier for them to choose whatever they want to do. So for them, the strictest interview is actually culture fit. even if you have cleared your basic algebra, which essentially gives you the skill set for training as a programmer, the culture fit is really strict. How much are you going to contribute to the community, and are you be able to take in whatever the community offers you? For girls, I think the challenge is, one challenge is, of course, the school level education that we test, because a lot of girls are dropped out from their school education. A lot of girls are not allowed to go to school even if they're enrolled. And the second is, even if they get selected, a lot of times parents don't send them far away from home, especially for schooling or NavGurukul education. So for them, we offer them more support, because right now we have more capacity for girls than we have applicants who are coming to us. So one is the basic logical skills, and then the culture fit. Those two set the threshold for us, and the threshold vary for boys and girls depending on the contextual circumstances. We make arrangements for them. Abhishek, do you want to add something on that?
Yeah, and also I think when we mentioned that colleges have this idea of getting the best of the best and the best.
Yeah.
It's a very cliched idea of getting the best aptitude people. I think Super 30 or any such initiative does fall into that trap as well, right? I mean, because our focus is only to get people into IIT, then your focus is to get the most promising students towards doing it. And Super 30, unfortunately, has been blamed for many malpractices to make sure that happens. I mean, one of the reasons, key things that is very important for us is to not get into that trap.
Yeah.
Ensure that we really look forward to make our curriculum and approach inclusive. And inclusivity does not come unless you're willing to take steps towards it, right? I mean, if you're saying we're inclusive towards transgender people or girls from tribal areas, let's say, how can you be inclusive to them unless your curriculum ensures that people who are lagging behind because of the lack of privilege, they're able to catch up? So there's a very strong philosophical disagreement, I think, the way screening happens otherwise. We try not to increase our technical levels, even if we have the option to.
We're actually reducing it. We're reducing the entry barriers. That how can we make it? We would envision NavGurukul where anyone who wants to do something can pursue it and not be hindered by.
And for example, in case of boys, we do screening because, as Surabhi mentioned, we have more applications, and that screening happens in terms of privilege and culture. So if there are students, if 100 students cleared our test and we need only 30, we'll try to do that on a basis of social criteria or criteria in terms of how much they're already looking forward to or how much they already align with the community values that we have. Essentially, academically, we philosophically have this very simple understanding. We have to work at the lowest possible bar and ensure that our curriculum or our 1 year journey is actually working a lot rather than just thinking that the students have to build up by themselves.
So talking to you guys, and especially like how Surabhi began, like it seems culture at NavGurukul is like a very important aspect. So like I'd like you guys to venture into that now. Like what is it about the culture at NavGurukul? You also mentioned things like that if you're at NavGurukul, you have to have a giving back kind of attitude. So if you can like start talking about what a day-to-day like life of a student is at NavGurukul, like and like how do you decide somebody's a cultural fit? Like if you can talk a bit more about what the culture is, how different it is from say IIT Delhi's culture. I paid a visit to NavGurukul and I was very surprised to find there are committees like the training and placement cell, and so like the names I've retained from IIT. So let's talk a bit more about your culture.
I hope that's the only thing I have retained from IIT Delhi. No, I love my alma mater. I don't hate IIT. It gave me everything I needed, but we have worked really hard to go away from the system that defines colleges like IIT. Culture at NavGurukul. There's a lot that goes into it. The first and foremost is that it's driven by the students fully. So they decide what is the arrangement that they want to be part of, right? So what does that mean? They decide the learning pace. They decide the content that they want to learn. They decide even the logistics of the place, like the budget is taken care by them, the food is taken care by them, the discipline is taken care by them. They come up with the rules, they come up with the penalties, they come up with the tasks that they have to be finished. And of course, there are involvement and mentoring, but they are at equal level of authority than anyone around here. So they can clearly challenge Abhishek and me if they don't like something. So one is challenging the notion of power, that all of us have an equal voice, and you have to exercise it. So there is a very strong culture of whistleblowing as well within the community, that if you don't like something, if you want to question the setup itself, you can do that. Pratha, do you have
I'm
something?
sorry. Yeah, I want to like interrupt you a bit. Like, I don't want you to talk in terms of abstract terms, like, because we haven't really spoken about what you guys are actually doing, like the fact that it's a residential program and you're focused on peer learning. Let's talk about that first, and then talk about like the ideals, because these guys don't even know about that. Like
Okay.
that you have a residential program and how, and you're online about Saral and all those things.
Oh, okay. So the basic infra. So our girls' campus is in Bangalore and the boys' campus is in Dharamshala, Himachal. When the students come here, the new students are inducted by the old students. So the new students are told what are the rules of the place, which means they have to take care of the cooking, they have to take care of their living, and they have to take care of the learning. There are tribes. The whole new batch is divided into different tribes. Each tribes take the responsibility of each other's learning. So let's say if in a tribe there are 5 girls, the tribe is not going to move forward when everyone else is not moving forward. So let's say if they're learning Python, they're going to help each other out in Python, that, hey, I'm doing this lecture, do you want to do this lecture with me? And there are a set of tasks which are set by both the students and their tech mentors. And then they together discipline themselves to finish those tasks. So that's one, is the tribe culture. The tribe basically keeps each other accountable in learning and their whatever task that they have to do. So one is the tribe. Second, we have councils, which is essentially discipline council, financial council, food council. So all of these 3-4 things take care of the operations of NavGurukul. So the students will decide the budget of the place and that they'll spend it accordingly. So that also helps them in taking solid decisions, right? Like they're managing the budget of, let's say, 1.5 lakh rupees of groceries. So they have to be really wise about it. So then second is the council. And they also have a discipline council, DISCO. So that's another thing that we have taken from IIT Delhi. And the DISCO decides the rules of and the penalties as well. What we discussed, mentors come in and, sorry?
You call it oil.
Oh, yeah, so this too, the mentors come in and suggesting that there is no notion of punishment, but what we call it opportunities for learning. So oil, opportunities to improve and learn. Yeah, the opportunities to improve and learn. So they get oil. So they decide what's going to be the oil when someone does something which sort of breaking the rule in the community. So that's on the learning and the operation side. These guys also decide. So what the thing that you're talking about, sense of giving. So we discuss heavily around why NavGurukul began with our students, and we talk about that you cannot be the same system that excluded you from the mainstream. So that means using your privilege properly, using your privilege in a way. I think I've lost everyone. No, people are here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So how does that giving back looks like? One is within your small circle of the NavGurukul. Like you have to, make sure everyone is learning. You have to make sure everyone is coming together with you. You have to be compassionate towards each other. So there's a lot of focus on empathetic listening. So we do sharing circles, for example, or life mapping sessions where people are comfortable being vulnerable with each other. So we don't discourage, if you need to have a difficult conversation within NavGurukul about yourself, about the system, about your peers, you should be able to do it in a very constructive way. And it's another, I mean, there are so many things. So another thing that we do is GBU, which is good, bad, and ugly, which is a very self-reflective, introspective learning. So on our internal communication channel, at the end of every week, everyone sends their GBU, which is what's the good that happened in the week, what's the bad, and what's the ugly, and what are the next steps. And when you read their GBU, they could be really, really personal, and thankfully, so far, people have felt comfortable being that expressive. And it's clear that it's going to be a non-judgmental space, so you can share whatever you feel like. And sometimes there are complaints, that, hey, I didn't like the food this time, and I don't like the person who behaved like this with me, and, and whatever. So that's one side. Then the giving culture. One is the immediate giving, how you're behaving with your peers, how you're behaving with the system. The second is month end. So we do this internship for 2 to 3 months. where we where we send the students to an organization which is working on the ground, so they can have an immersive experience of how things are dealt in different communities. So that's another one. What else?
Um, Winter
So
treat.
I want to share a anecdote. I want to share an anecdote of like when I visited like the NavGurukul Bangalore campus. So like just like what I saw in the culture. So like they have these walls where they had written use toggle whenever. So like the so I'm talking more in terms of software engineering perspective, like what these kids do. So like they are also inculcated in like what are considered good software engineering practices more than just like learning the programming languages, like use of toggle. And I saw all these kids like deep, like when I told them I'm a software engineer, they came up with their problems and they wanted me to solve all these doubts. They also showed me their curriculum, like an online curriculum that Abhishek and Rishabh had probably created long time back, which is called Saral. I would really like if you guys can talk a bit about that also. It's a self-learning platform. So these kids have like a Python course. So five, 6 kids were working on Python, and they're just trying to finish that course. They have assignments and they peer review each other's work, and in that way, like they are basically teaching each other. And then they graduate, and then they choose a different track. So like now they're on the React track. Now they're learning React. So now these 5 kids are now specializing in React. So I would really like if you guys talk a bit more about the software engineering aspect of it, because like a lot of all people here are software people, so we'll relate to
Yeah.
that.
Uh,
Okay. You're also a software person, bro. You work in a software company.
Dude,
right.
Go on,
So,
Abhishek.
yeah. So I think in terms of curriculum and the pedagogy, we have one, as Siddharth mentioned, we have a platform called Saral, which has content in Hindi to start with. The idea being, if I ask you to learn programming in German language, it'll be very hard for you to do so because, assuming you don't know the language, one is a problem of knowing the language. Second is knowing something which is learning something which is very new to you, right? Programming in this case. So we told ourselves that they have to start in Hindi, and eventually when they become comfortable at least with programming, and they also go through English learning at the same time. After 4 or 5 months, they basically shift to the mainstream courses, Coursera, Udacity, or whatever. But they have to start in a much more cushioned way, such that the learning is not affected by not knowing the language. So we start like that. So we created a lot of curriculum in Python, and for us, even doing Python curriculum was not easy because a lot of these students did not know basic maths. Example, they would not know how algebra works. So even something like Boolean operators was not easy. So, like for example, I never even like I don't know when I learned Boolean operators. I mean that thing really never happened explicitly, but here it happens very explicitly. So initial 4 5 months are sort of to get them into programming zone itself, and actually we can say effectively the programming starts after 7 months. First 5 6 months is to make sure that they understand maths basics, which are important for the programming. While it happens only through programming, so we will not do any maths course, but the idea is, let's say they're doing Boolean operators, they also understand what numbers basically are, right? I mean, and that's very interesting because, for example, these students do not have a very strong idea of what a number line is. And that, again, is the case because one, the English learning is very ineffective in the schools. So the visual system in the mind is not very strongly developed. Other is that most of the learning that they had, especially in maths, was very rote. So, for example, even a question like, can you find me the second highest number in the list is not easy because it requires you to imagine that, okay, let me have two markers on the line, and based on 3 different cases I have to update the second biggest number, right? So for all those things we do a lot of curriculum building, and we are also trying to build a visual map, at least in the mind of the student for this, right? That's the biggest challenge in terms of curriculum, and it's still a work in progress. We are far behind from where we want to be, and that's where I feel that we have to do a lot of work to be more inclusive, clearly, because that's what ensure that who is able to complete this part to move to the next one. So this part is really important. The other really important part is that we do not evaluate people on their outcomes. We evaluate them on the basis of what they're delivering, what they're basically doing. The idea is simple. Let's say if there are two students, that's I mean that's something which there's a famous comic strip where There are many animals out there, and there's a evaluator which says, like whosoever climbs a tree first out of all of you, we will basically award that person the first grade. The animals are of very different nature. One is a fish, another is a monkey, another is an elephant. So clearly, there are differences in how they're going to do it. The mockery is clearly on our education and evaluation system. And the same things happen in our colleges, right? I mean, people come from such a diverse background, and we give them the same examinations and tell them that you do not know this, you do not know this, you do not know. So at NavGurukul, we realized that since we're building again a diverse community, we cannot do this. And the focus is really on the inputs that they're doing, because that's where a lot of efforts is going on, right? So who is really putting most of the work? Who is really trying to bring the values of helping each other out? Essentially, the values and the inputs are awarded. So to give a very simple contrasting example, if you're going to have a hackathon in a college, you're going to be awarded for the best product or the fanciest possible thing that you've built. At NavGurukul, when hackathons happen, there are 3-4 different kinds of awards. One is for the team which worked hardest during the hackathon. Whatever you did, whatever you could achieve, it's a different thing altogether. But did you work hardest? Did you try to do it? Second, the team which tried to help the other teams most. So that way we are encouraging the right values, right? Social engineering in a very fancy way. Third, the team which tried to make a product which was most inclusive in terms of the use case. So did you build a parking application, or did you build something which is much more useful to other people, right? And finally, there can be, so I mean, there can be many awards, right? And most of the theme is that we have to focus on the inputs and the values that are being brought to the table. So any exercise that we have, any evaluation that we have, focuses on this as the learning principle or evaluation principle. We do have some assessments on the basis of outcomes. We don't have any examinations at all. At the same time, when the students feel they're ready for an interview, they request for an interview, and an alumni student basically interviews them and shares their assessment in a subjective manner. So we again made a point that you cannot give them a score. It's inhuman to tell them you're 6 on 10, 7 on 10, 4 on 10. It does not work like that. Tell them the good, bad, and ugly. Tell them what they're good at. Tell them what they are bad at and what they can work on immediately. And ugly is just, I mean, we use this term because obviously it comes from movie, but ugly is more of a introspective place where you can think of larger patterns in your learning behavior which needs to be corrected. So by doing that, I mean, the outcome-based assessments are much fewer, and they're very subjective. And they're mostly at your own request. So if you feel like you ask for it, if you don't feel like it's all good, because we really used to do time, then we try to kill the race, right? I mean, there's always this race, who's going to do it faster, who's going to do it faster. We killed it absolutely. Like, okay, it does not matter. It does not matter. What matters is you learn at your pace, you learn while being happy, and whenever you're ready, you basically graduate. Whether you take 6 months or you take 1.5 years, you're never going to celebrate it. What you're going to celebrate is, were you someone who you really had a nice journey or not? And so most of the appreciation that happens in the community is centered around it. You will really find someone saying, oh, so for example, there's this girl, Ravina. She comes, her baselines were the smallest in her batch. I mean, it should have been, the case where she should have been the most suffering person, the most depressed person. It's completely the way around. She is the life of this campus, and that's because she just accepted, I'm going to take more time to do this. And in her mind, it's not a 1-year course anymore. It's a 2-year to 3-year course. She learns music, she learns dance, she learns video editing, everything she learns, and she takes a lot of initiatives in the community. She gets a lot of awards in the community because all those awards are around hard work, and she's probably one of the hardest working people out here. At the same time, her conceptual depth is crazy, to the point that people who graduated in 8 months, they were essentially being mentored by Ravina when they really had to work on the concepts. Primarily because while Ravina spent 1.5 years to learn in terms of the length, 1/3 of what they would have learned, but her depth is far more than anyone else. So there is a course on web scraping, and there are 14 tasks. So it's a very famous joke here because typically every task is supposed to take 2 days. For the first task, Ravina took 1 entire month. And when that happened, she celebrated in the entire campus. So I finished my web scraping task. And that's really interesting because there was no, thinking, I have to submit my assignment. How can I do that? In fact, we are facing reverse problems actually, because now ultimately these people have to go to corporates and startups and all. So they got really frustrated. So the complaints like, nobody says hi to me. Nobody asks, how are you doing? Do you feel good today? They're facing emotional problems, right? Because the community takes care of their emotional health. And they're facing deadline problems. They're not used to deadlines at all. So towards the end of the program, we start pushing them for deadlines. Hackathons are there, where they're not supposed to sleep, but really focus on deadlines. But yeah, largely the curriculum is centered around take your time, make your mistakes, it's fine. We have a lot more focus on doing. So it's a project-based approach. We give you projects that you can essentially deliver. And so that way people know how to build systems. But at the same time, there's a deficiency in terms of writing good code. So we are also trying to now address this through curriculum, for example, by giving them some good projects which are already implemented in a good code base and asking them to do more and on top of it, so that they also have an understanding of how good code bases look like. So I mean, there are clearly a lot of deficiencies in what we have in terms of our curriculum, and we know some of them, we don't know some of them, but largely it's a journey which is taken by the student with the help of the peers um, and the mentors. The mentors can be senior students or the mentors can be alumni students. Loyalty of these students is clearly very high. So the alumni students essentially stay back, they help them a lot. The people who are in Bangalore, they keep coming to Bangalore campus. So there's a very dynamic environment here. Really. So while it's a girls' campus, it's sort of a very co-ed like experience because a lot of alumni students are boys, they come here, they teach and do these things. And for us, there are many challenges in terms of not just curriculum, but also the pedagogy, because if people are coming there with some sense of authority, it really messes up with our culture, right? I mean, say if you're an alumni student, you come, you start scolding, tumse ye nahi hoga, tumse wo nahi hoga, and it is very natural, right? I mean, if you like, tumse nahi hoga. Recently it happened, the students told them, you can't handle this much pressure, I don't think you can work in a company. So sometimes we are used to making such blanket statements and all. So a lot of our culture in terms of learning is centered around building the right values. And that's why I think Surabhi and I continuously keep jumping back to values. Because while implementation is what you see, values is what drives it. Values is what tells that we have to have certain standards of the implementation, and values is what challenges us to keep improvising on them, whatever implementation it is, unless the value that we feel is being met. And it's always an ongoing journey. But reiterating values is very important. For example, reiterating here that the inputs are more important is very, very crucial. Because if you do not do that, what really starts happening is people sometimes start saying, okay, I did so much better. And that's very natural because they have been doing this 17, 18 years of life. And so especially when the new students come, you need to ensure that they are going through some exercises like these where they understand what culture is. Yeah. So then we have.
I'd like to.
Go on, Saket. Like I'll ask you after.
Sorry, I need to drop on in like next 3 minutes, but I want to ask one question which is pretty personal to me, and I definitely want to ask your opinion on that because you probably are dealing with that, which is around language, right? I think you talked about like language also plays a like really big role, especially if you don't know English or if you come from a background where English has not been the main thing that people actually care about. So I come from Bihar. People only care about maths. There's nothing about like, oh, this guy is able to speak in English and all that. Obviously, you carry that burden like forward where you get hit with like placement communities not telling you like you're not good enough. You're sitting in off campus and people are like just destroying you, especially if you're against people like from South and all. So I want to understand like how are you dealing with that? Where people who come with like not even a base level of like English and mostly English, not having that knowledge, and then try to cope them or try to increase that common denominator where everyone at least has a basic understanding of like English, and you take it from there.
So I'd just like to add to so first answer his question, then take a segue into like people who graduate from NavGurukul. Like how did you guys make alliances with companies? Like how did you pitch the companies to hire from you guys? Like these students don't have recognized degrees, and like how are your alumni performing in all these companies? So after answer Sakit's question, like venture into that. Like how did your and like how your alumni network like interacts with you and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, so to Sagar's question first, I mean, the first thing again for us is to really establish that you're going to have different English levels and be okay with that. We have seen the most drastic improvements in terms of learning English from the people who actually knew at least. Ravina is a case example. Then there is a student called Apeksha. She barely knew any English, and today she speaks English one of the most comfortable manner in the campus. So I feel, first of all, we need to sort of make learners very comfortable with the idea of not and not comparing with each other. And to do that, we have conversations around. And now we don't need to actually do a lot of these something explicitly. They're happening all by itself, right? So when the conversations do that happen, it's privilege, right? If you know English, it's not that you're smarter, just that you had the privilege to be exposed to the language. So when you sort of start reducing it to that, people realize that if I do not know English, it's not my fault, and I can learn it. All I have to give myself is the exposure, and I have to work towards it. So by doing that, essentially, you're able to have a very strong mentally important effect on the children, because of which the learners who are struggling, they do not feel they're struggling anymore. They just feel they need to work harder. And there's a very huge difference. I've seen people in my batch who struggle, disappointed, and resorting to some very bad coping mechanisms because they didn't. I mean, I felt myself inferior in college despite having 8.7 whatever GPA, because my dad told me you're not doing 9 plus, and he didn't know what 9 plus GPA looks like, but it had to be 9 plus GPA. So I mean, I think that's the most important thing for us. Then obviously, uh, uh, there are very simple things like the campus is only English speaking, so you only speak English basically. If you don't know English, it's fine. You make a symbol, you say the same thing in Hindi, people will help you with that. But you have to speak in English. Also, at the same time, we need to ensure that they are not thinking that English is the supreme force in the universe. So there's a very simple rule: once you get English, you choose your language. So then it's a conscious choice. The only thing is, to reject English, you need to know English, unfortunately. So for example, Surbhi and other people, we don't speak in English. We have jobs. We feel more comfortable speaking Hindi. I mean, we choose, but at least I to love Hindi a lot than English. So I mean, also that's another conscious challenge. In English is a professional tool for you. Get it. If you want to reject it, but after you got it, that's the necessity. And there are a lot of games that we're trying to develop because we realize that we cannot make it. So I mean, let's say software engineering is taking a lot of your mental bandwidth. The English should not do that. English should rather rejuvenate you. So there are a lot of physical games that we're trying to plan such that students can learn English effectively. For example, there's something called NavGurkul Club where the students sit together, they assign roles to themselves. For example, there's someone who's a time checker, there's someone who's a grammar reader, many roles. And then they do debates. And then other people give them feedback, etc. So there are many such activities that they do. They play Mafia in English. Just play games, just expose yourself, watch movies in class and it's okay. Do whatever. In terms of jobs, I think one of the biggest problems that we are facing is in terms of communication. Our students' way of communication is very different. It comes from two problems, two places. One, they come from backgrounds where communication was not as important. Secondly, at NavGurukul also somewhere we have given them more liberties in terms of communication. While in last few months, I think we have done a lot more. We are trying to be professional and corporate-ish, so that the students can adopt to that culture also. For example, they have to have a meeting at 8:33, and if you don't show up at 8:33, your meeting is cancelled. So sometimes they do those stupid things just to make sure that they know what the life is going to be like after something. So yeah, communication is one challenge that a lot of our students have faced, especially the initial students. And the boys face it more than the girls. Otherwise, I think largely the students are able to do well. In fact, they're able to do better, I think, than the expectation that the people have. There are a lot of doubts that these people have in terms of hiring, etc. The students do need at least 3 to 4 months of exposure in a company before they are adjusted well, actually. Primarily that comes because it's a strongly new environment for them in terms of technology, in terms of the way people communicate, which is the kind of things that communicate. The culture is very different. So, but after 3 to 4 months, we have seen that students typically do much better, and a lot of students get increments within the first year itself.
I just want to point out that that's not a weakness of our student as much as the weakness of the corporate culture to not be fully inclusive and diverse. Because we're not used to having people from diverse background. We're used to having same templates of people coming from similar templates of college.
Yeah, I mean, funnily, or I mean, sadly, but there's a significant sense of mockery towards people who are not like us. And sometimes it's apparent that these students, when they join the companies, they're not them. And they do face it sometimes in a subtle manner, sometimes in a very abrasive manner.
It's mockery or condescension, or it's just the sense of, oh, we're doing you a favor by giving you a job, but not fully. But okay, there are companies who have done amazingly.
I mean, fortunately, so we are actually also curating the list of companies. So fortunately, we are shifting away from such companies. We are directly refusing to work with them any further. And moving to companies, I feel the culture is much more inclusive, and that's where a lot of work that Surabhi is doing is very important. Is to build a very strong conversation on what inclusivity and diversity means to really make it happen, right? But fortunately, I think, like, for example, we have got students in some big corporates like Mindtree, ThoughtWorks, Direct. Then we have students who are working in startups, like a lot of startups. So that's happening. But yeah, again, it's just an ongoing process, and we need to identify what kind of opportunities do they align with most. in both in a mutual way. The corporate should also feel aligned with students.
And just answering Pratat's question around why companies are hiring students without degrees, because we're giving them job ready people, because our students are skilled. So I think Apple has around 50% of its employees without degrees, right? And Google has the same sort of moving towards similar statistic. And that you see that trend across many developed countries, UK and US and many European countries. So the same thing is in India, like when 93% of our graduates, engineering graduates are not job ready, we are giving them, we're solving that very pain point for the corporates. That we're giving you a skilled, high spirited, employee. So they're okay with that.
How did you convince them of that? Like, how did you convince the companies of that? Like, did they because like even the interviews that are taken are not really they don't really test for coding skills. They test for mathematical questions.
We're changing that. I mean, we basically tell them if you're going to take on the basis of math or aptitude, let's not do it like that. I mean, let's not even continue. But you feel if you want to check on the code quality and things, let's do about it. Fortunately, there are many companies who are interested in doing this. At the same time, there's a very significant talent shortage in the country. If you look at React, you hardly have people who know it really well. So especially if you want to hire entry-level talent in React, you need to get it. So I think we are able to solve this problem in a way which is important to the market.
And also, I think there are internal champions as well within systems.
Yeah.
Sometimes there have been incidences where an individual was so impressed with what students were doing, they became the champion within their company to say, hey, I think we need to give these guys a shot. And once you have one batch in, then that it becomes, we want to, then it becomes a talent pool that they keep coming back to.
Yeah, the case in point is Mindtree. We got a person called Rishan who was heading their training in the main Mindtree training actually was headed by Rishan, and he was super impressed with what we do. So he basically got 5 students in Mindtree. They didn't even have an interview. Just said, "We take them." Interestingly, they were asked to attend only half of the training because they knew better than their college graduates, and they're actually still performing better than the graduates over there, despite having this training. And they're in the high performing team of Mindtree, and they're given the harder problems even in that team so that they can be tested more. The only problem is L&T recently acquired Mindtree. Otherwise, the Mindtree founder, Gupta, he wanted to start a 100 students campus exclusively for Mindtree. Just that Mindtree was acquired and all of that completely hindered the journey that we were making into Mindtree. So, I mean, you never know how you may find someone who is really who's trying to make sure on your behalf that. And I think NavGurukul fortunately has been a beneficiary of many such people or heroes or whatever, right? I mean, who took a lot of plunge, who took a lot of faith in us and made sure that we can be trusted while we were very, very young. Mindtree, like Accenture funded us when we barely had 10 students. They funded us with $1 crore of money, which is not very usual in the non-profit sector that way. So I think largely the reason why that's happening is because it's something which is very relatable. People understand it. The impact is very high. We're able to educate someone in 1 lakh rupees and also able to recover that money. And then you're able to work with sort of sections of population which is not having access to the kind of opportunities that we are even.
How can you recover the money?
The students pay back voluntarily after the job.
So your model is like the Lambda school, similar to the Lambda school model. Like after the students graduate, they pay back with some sort of like some percentage of their income.
Culturally, absolutely.
Yeah.
See, again, I mean, Krita, so just to look at the challenge, the student that you're talking about, they're going to earn 20,000 rupees as a first salary. For them to send back 4,000 rupees is not easy. And yet they do it because there's a culture which makes them do it. So the fundamental difference between paying, let's say, 2% or 3% of the salary while you're earning, let's say, 1 lakh in India versus paying 20% of the salary when you're earning 20,000 rupees is a lot. And that's why we economically might look similar, but culturally pulls apart. And for us, it has been a challenge. I mean, to make sure that the students understand the value of giving back, to make sure that we're not dependent on a lot of outsider money. And the reason why we want it to be like that is because we want it to be financially sustainable. Primarily because when you start taking a lot of money, people start patronizing you. People start behaving like as if you're a charity. We do not want to function like a charity on both sides. Neither
Not
we
that
want.
there is something majorly wrong with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something that we choose
Yeah,
not to do.
right. I mean, we don't want to feel that we're charitable to these students. We give them access and they're paying us back for that. If they don't, it's okay. But if they do, it helps us to do it more. Similar to the corporates, when we say we are financially sustainable, it makes it very easier for corporates to understand that what we do can be very very practical. Because right now they spend around 40,000 rupees to train someone in data entry. We're saying, and that's never recovered. You're saying in 1 lakh rupees, we'll train someone to be a software engineer and get the money back. So the pitch is hugely different. So right now, even if you want to open a 200 students campus, corporates are supportive of it. Just that we do not have the bandwidth to do it right away.
So I had two quick questions. How often do you induct a new batch of students? Is it every year or sooner than that? And also, over multiple batches, have you seen the sort of efficiency of peer learning from like senior to junior batches become better, or like some best practices have distilled out and it's easier to orient newer students and batches now?
Yeah. So, we do have admissions on rolling basis. So the admissions happen practically every single month. At the same time, in terms of becoming better, definitely. I mean, in fact, that's one of the biggest complaints that our alumni students have. They always come and say, when we came, it was so hodgepodge, it was so chaotic, and now it's so much better than these students. And I always tell them that, it's just a compliment and take it as a compliment rather than as a complaint, because any system which is going well, it has to, have this complaint from the people who came first. So I think over there, clearly we have made a lot of progress. There's a lot to be done, but the good part is that the ownership is very shared. So the students themselves come with a lot of techniques, and some of their techniques are very interesting. So, for example, we introduced pair programming, which is a very obvious technique from the world, right? But then the students change the technique and they call a technique called takma, tera code, mera question. So what they would do is, because some students are writing code without questioning a lot, so they said we'll build your questioning power by questioning on your behalf. So let's say if you are coding, Kritarth will keep pushing you for questions. ये कैसे किया? ये क्यों किया? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? So essentially, they do this very rigorous questioning just to make sure that the person is asking those questions to himself while coding on as well. So that was the technique that they came up with, and now they follow it. So I think there's a lot of creation from the student side itself in terms of how do we work on this. But largely, alumni students again are able to contribute a lot. For example, we knew Agile obviously, but now the alumni students go and they learn Agile and they come back, oh, yeah, we need to do this Agile way. And okay, what do you mean? Then they give you fundas and they say, okay, show me something and we'll think about it. And they show you something. Then I mean, so a lot of these things are happening, and it's more of a something which is going to continue to happen, evolve. Although at the same time, we're not very rigid about anything that happens at all. For example, let's say you're doing daily stand-ups. For example, the students do that. We do not force them to do daily stand-ups every day. Like if they feel that now they're losing their interest, they stop doing it for next 1 month or 2 months. Then they again restore it as needed. So a lot of it is actually by choice, and for them to feel that this is important to them. We hardly enforce any habits on them. While habits is very important, we stress in them, but we do not tell them to do something really important. I mean, something right away or in a rigid way.
So my this will be my last question, and it's directed to Surbhi. So I want to know, you guys have mentioned the word diversity many times. So I want to know, what are you guys like? What is your vision of diversity, and what are the initiatives that you're taking for it? And the other question is a bit unrelated: is people who look up to you, admire your work, how can they contribute, whether it's financially or maybe software engineers can talk about what they learn in software engineering as a soft skills, and maybe have a guest session or something. So if you can talk about how can people contribute, and what you're doing about diversity.
Yeah. So just briefly touching upon the vision of diversity, I think it should be accessible to the most vulnerable, and most vulnerable is very contextual. It changes. So for example, if you're just focusing on gender, it becomes, can you span through men, women, transgender people, right? So this batch, we're trying to make sure that we get at least few trans women and trans men to give the test or try it out. If you talk about caste, within caste, you have so much of social hierarchy. So for example, there's a Musahar community in Bihar, which is lowest in the caste hierarchy rung. And so how do you ensure that the girls from that community is coming to our campus? You talk about social issues as a context as a context. So you talk about if someone who has survived child trafficking or human trafficking, how can we make sure they come here? HIV positive people, how do we make sure they come here? Or differently able or disabled people, how do we make sure they come here? So in fact, like this time, someone did ask me about, can you take in a blind student? And we did have a discussion around it. And we said, you know what, we'd open it up and see what happens. We're going to build our capacity and not put the pressure on the person to not access this. So that's the vision of diversity, that people who are most vulnerable in their context should be able to access NavGurukul. And diversity is nothing without inclusion. So then every time a new context comes in the campus, we need to make sure that the person is included properly and peacefully and joyfully in the campus. So that's diversity and inclusion for us. Talking about your second question, how people can help us in so many ways, in practical sense, one, we need dedicated mentors and volunteers. So a lot of people show interest in NavGurukul's work and they want to help us. But I think a lot of people take volunteering not as professionally as they take their corporate jobs. And we try to reduce that. We love when people make relationships with our students, because that's when the most learning happens. So a lot of on campus, people can come and take sessions, periodic sessions. They can decide how many sessions with the students. Of course, they need to decide it with the students. How many sessions do they want to take? On what do they want to take sessions? So one is mentoring. Second is funding. We can always use, monetary support, both for expanding our operations so that we can do more outreach to, deeper, the diverse communities that I was talking to you about, because outreach requires a lot of resources. Funding is another one. Both individual funding and corporate funding or institutional funding matters to us, because a lot of times individuals make this giving habit that per month I'm going to give you this, and that really works for us. Funding is another. The third one, which could really work for us, just talk about our work, because partnership is how we drive the whole system. We need a lot of NGO partners who are doing amazing work with their own communities, and they are the ones who send their students to us or their associated children to us. So yeah, talk about his work, spread the word. If you feel any sort of partnership is possible, let us know. Anything else? And yeah, discuss NavGurukul more as a philosophy, I guess, because that could actually bring change. I think I personally feel very proud of the values of NavGurukul. I think those values can be inculcated in your homes, in your workplaces, and your education institutions. The one thing that we didn't touch upon is the focus on mental health in NavGurukul. I think we focus a lot on that. So yeah, basically talk about us as a philosophy and challenge us. So that's all the help that probably we could use.
So I just want to say, like, I have never seen a transgender person in India do anything else than they like what they do, like beg on streets. Like I've never seen that, and just the idea of, that I just wanted to point that out.
And that needs to change, right? Because there's so many people like you and I sitting in their homes, not getting access to the kind of things that we take for granted. And I think that really needs to change. And we don't need to shape their narrative. I think they need to shape their own narrative, and that's the time once they become, as equally part of mainstream as you and I are. So yeah, that's the hope. That maybe 2 years later you'll have a different comment on the
Yep.
transgender community,
Yeah, maybe. So, Malla sir, do you have any questions?
Actually, I have one last sort of a cliche engineering question. So how are you about scaling this model? Like, have you thought about, since I heard that it's very sort of self driven and kind of it sort of takes its own shape, and you encourage that, you encourage things to evolve on their own. Are you thinking
Yes.
about kind of open sourcing this model? It's
Yeah,
very naive
I'll
question.
add to that. I'll add to that. Other than like with scaling, like, do you want to venture into anything outside of software engineering?
Yes, the answer is resounding yes. Okay, so objectively speaking, like in terms of goals for scaling, there are multiple things that we are thinking. One, we should be able to provide multiple curriculum options to students. Like if you're talking about choice of profession, they should be able to choose whether they want to be, let's say, a psychologist or a graphic illustrator or something else. So all the modern skill sets, we want to expand in that. So we've already, an core team member she's already working on developing a curriculum around clinical psychology. So that's diversifying your curriculum is one area where we're going to thinking of expanding. And of course, in terms of numbers as well, that can be open a bigger campus for students from, different places. Can we lower our entry barriers so that more students who need such an opportunity can use it? So we're thinking about it. The only thing that we're not rushing towards it, because we do want to understand how can we scale up while retaining our core values? And I think that requires a lot of thinking and also a lot of doing. So one side is the admission side. How do we perfect this cycle of reaching out to most diverse? Unless we're not diverse enough, we're not moving forward. Because if you want to open a campus for boys, campus of 500 boys, we can do it tomorrow itself. But we don't want to do it because we do want to make sure that unless we don't have at least 50-50 boys to girls ratio, or we don't have diverse caste and religion in on campus, we're not moving forward. So the moment you give yourself that constraint towards scaling up, you're able to be loyal to your initial values, right? On which this whole thing was founded. So yeah, I mean, we're thinking about scaling up only once we have perfected our certain cycles. But the conversation is very, very much on. And I think some funders are really interested in having both the scaling conversation and the philosophical conversation, which in many ways makes us very lucky. Do you want to add something on that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's just a conflict that we face a lot. Do we scale with what we have, or we try to work towards the values that we feel are important? So, and we are trying to push ourselves in terms of values a lot more than I think what we think we would. For example, let's say diversity in team. Most of the times we value diversity in terms of number of female employees versus male employees. For us, we are setting up a target in terms of whether half of our team salary at least goes to the females. This way, we ensure that at least they just share some similar sort of power that the males in our team. Similarly, in terms of the admissions, we are trying to do a lot of work. We already have students with HIV. We're trying to work with students who are transgender. We are trying to work with students who are differently able. So, as we mentioned, like every value that we sort of trying to push ourselves on makes a challenge harder, and yet it makes it more beautiful at the same time, because when you add the diversity, you really learn a lot. For example, the kind of understanding of, for example, a country like India, where people do not have any sense of mental health, any sense of HIV, any sense of, for example, there's this person I read mentioned that when I was in India, I never knew that differently able people exist. But when I went to USA, I saw them everywhere, and I thought it's a US specific problem, only to realize that it was actually an accessibility problem in India, where people do not know, where people do not actually see people who are differently abled around. So they feel that maybe the problem does not exist at all. You hardly, right? Let's look at our roads. You can't imagine a blind person walking because they'll genuinely be killed with the kind of rules that we follow on roads. So for us, the diversity really holds a lot of values. For example, the value of really looking on the inputs rather than outputs is very important. And that's why this will be mentioned, that each and every value that we're trying to work on is so dear to us that we feel that a lot more conversation has to happen, so that in all the cultures, and academic cultures, and corporate cultures, and working cultures, we are able to treat each other as people, right? Fundamentally, we didn't sit and say, okay, what are the hardest values that we can aspire for? These are the values that we thought are just essential to treat each other nicely. That's it. So somewhere I think a conversation on this is sort of very crucial for us to have. And another, I think, key thing that we are essentially now starting to work towards is to build a network of people who really align with these values, and figure out if we can have a more vocal group of people towards NavGurkul, because ultimately we have a very small team, like just me, Surabhi, and one or two more people working towards it. So 90% of our time is actually just spent on working. So what we need is also a group of people who can help us spread what we are trying to do around, mobilize resources, whether it be funds, whether it be like people who can advise us, etc.
I do want to emphasize that individuals have incredibly supported us. Like a lot of times people feel that you have to be an organization to be really meaningful in their contribution, but it's crazy how sometimes individual people have done so much. And the current example, like there's this girl Anvesha, and she's working on case studies. So she's basically interviewing our students and writing their profiles, because a lot of NGOs, when they reach out to students on our behalf, they need case studies. And she's so professional about this. Like yesterday, she asked me, could you give me a deadline by which you need this? And I said, it's your convenience, depending on how much work you're saying. No, you can give me a deadline and I'll make sure that happens. And she's very dedicated, right? So there's another girl, Sukhneet, who's doing graphics for us. And so I think I'm just saying that individuals, right from giving us money to finding our students a foot in the door in their companies, to doing tiny things for us, but with dedication, they've been phenomenal. And a huge shout out to them if they're listening to this. That's all.
Yeah, that's so it was very nice chatting with you guys, and I really like I think more than the work, like I was very inspired by your philosophy and how you're trying to stay true to that. And I like particularly remember the thing that Abhishek said about subjective feedback versus objective feedback of, because like the IIT culture is all about like what pointer are you, and like it kind of governs your later this thing. So you're really, it's not just about providing education to unprivileged, you're basically trying to create a completely new thing. Like I don't know how the students would react if you have a transgender like working with them. They'll probably gain some sort of empathy. And yeah, it's more like not just software engineering, there are also a lot of life skills. Like I'll just say my parting thing. So I went to NavGurukul, and I think like after talking for a while, like it hit some, like it was like 12 or something, which is their study break, and all the students just stood up and started dancing. So they have these periodic breaks every day where they take breaks from what they are doing and then they do something fun. Then they like showed me all the things that they were doing. They play football, they organize their own stuff. So it just seemed like in a lot of ways they are getting the education that people in IITs don't get. So I was very impressed by how insistent they were on those things. So yeah, like very nice chatting with you, Abhishek, and we'd definitely like you to stay on. We'd like to share your this thing, like promote your work, and we'd love if you can join us for some other calls whenever, and like stay part of our community as well.
I
So
just want to quickly mention that yeah, it's of course it was extremely inspiring listening to what you're doing. It was definitely mind blowing, especially the part about kind of intentionally creating a diverse environment is something that I think is just at the cutting edge. Like anywhere I've heard like diversity and inclusion is sort of in any sort of context, it becomes a problem for as you become bigger. So what you're doing is definitely sort of groundbreaking, new kind of thinking. And I would really sort of hope that what you learn sort of goes out to the world and really sort of informs other people in their endeavors. So more power to you and best of luck.
Thank you.
so thanks guys. We'll take off.
Bye.
Very nice chatting with you.
Yeah, thank